Civic Space TV. Good afternoon and welcome to today's edition of the Citizens Chat on Civic Space TV. I am Phillip Muliisa. Today is the 15th of December 2023 and the chat is about the impact of US sanctions against Uganda's deteriorating human rights record and runaway corruption. In the studios, I have distinguished citizens of this country, Uganda, and by extension, the African continent, whom I will introduce, and we see what they have for us today. From the extreme left, from the Uganda People's Congress, the Honorable Joseph Ochieno. Honorable, you're most welcome.
Pleasure to be here. I'm particularly delighted that to my right is a fantastic long-term friend of mine.
Thank you so much. And next to Honorable Joseph is a lady, the only lady on the show, Madam Miriam Kyomugasho. She is the founder and director, Africa Refugee and Immigration Community Center. You're most welcome, Madam.
Thank you, Phil.
And we're happy to have you in the country.
Thanks. Yeah, it's my pleasure to be home.
Thank you. And last but not least is Dr. Robert Ojambo, who is the head of the Faculty of Political Science and History at Kyambogo University. Doctor, you're most welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And you being a doctor in the history and political science, I want to start with you. This monster called sanctions. What is it? What is it about and where does it even come from?
Thank you very much, Phillips, and good afternoon, viewers. Yeah, sanctions. This is a diplomatic word. It's used in diplomatic and world politics. After the Second World War, I think there was a lot of complaint by different powers that some countries had become so big. And out of that, I think with the formation of the United Nations Organization, the United Nations Organization tried to do a part where they would have an army, but they did not succeed until later. And of course, they agreed on certain things and signed the UN declarations, a number of them. And therefore, the only way to fulfill those declarations would be if somebody has not fulfilled what he is supposed to do, sanctions are laid to you. And then what would be these sanctions? One, they would isolate you in certain things. And two, you do not have certain privileges that other members get. And three, if it is more serious, they would take the matter to the UN Security Council. And if the UN Security Council decides against you later, after the formation of the NATOs and all those other organizations, there would be a military action against you, like it has happened in so many other parts of the world. So sanctions normally is to deny you certain privileges in the diplomatic corps. Now, in this case, what we are going to discuss today is not in the UN circle. It is a bilateral relationship between Uganda and the United States of America. Now, the United States of America, after the Second World War, again, I'll start from there, I don't want to go very far, assumed this role of the supervisor of the world, which in normal terms called superpower. And because the British, the French, and the others were going away, she assumed that neocolonial control over poor countries like in Africa and Asia and South America. So because of their bilateral relations, they are supposed to fulfill certain things for poor countries through demands. And countries like Uganda have to be given demands to do certain things in a certain way. And if they don't, they are given sanctions. And this is where we are now.
Thank you so much, Doctor, for that overview of what sanctions and the history behind this. I want to come to you, Lady Miriam.
Yes.
He says it originates from the World War and the formation of the UN, but sanctions on the country of Uganda, we talk individuals in this country sanctioned, and it is not unique to this country.
Yeah.
I want to question, is it fair for the United States, people very many kilometers from this country, to be punishing for wrongdoings in this country?
I wouldn't call punishing. I think they are trying to disassociate themselves from people who are doing some things which are beyond the pale as far as human rights are concerned. So when they say we are sanctioning, say, Kareke Hora, who was the former IGP, and say, don't associate with us, don't do business with us, we're going to also stop you from traveling to any other place related with USA, or do business with any citizen, USA citizen, or anything to do with USA government. It's like they're saying, hi, you are abhorrible, we cannot deal. I mean, on a personal level, yes, why would you associate yourself with a person who is doing things you don't believe in as a country? USA champions human rights. They profess to be the champion of human rights globally. So if you want to be a partner of a country like Uganda, they have to do stuff you believe in as a partner. But if they do things and you say, hey, we don't believe in this. So it's like you have a neighbor, and a neighbor is doing, maybe they are drunkards, and you don't want them to associate with your children because they are drunkard, and you say, come on, I'm closing my door over this. I don't want you to contaminate my family with your bad habits. So basically that's what they are doing. They could be far away, but what are we doing with them? Uganda and USA are partners. We call themselves development partners, quote unquote. But we are partners in so many things. USAID is funding so many projects in Uganda, especially in the health and development sector. They are partners on so many grounds, both in government sector and non-governmental sector. And they are partners as bilateral, as he talked, bilateral relations. We have an understanding with them. They have their embassy here. We have our embassy in Washington. So we have an understanding. But you see, when you do something and someone says, hey, really as partners, you can't keep doing ABCD, you are contravening the international laws. We have some standards and you are really operating below the standards. And if you don't reform, we are cutting ties. And as far as sanctions are concerned, I think they are not even doing enough, because USA does a lot to support the Uganda Defense Forces, the UPDF and the police and other related agencies. And those agencies are the lead violators of human rights in our country today. But what sanctions do we see targeting those individuals who violate their rights? We know them. But what have they done? I've not seen them saying, we are sanctioning the commander who ordered the killing of people, say, in November 2020, when they murdered 50 plus people on Kampala streets. Who is that person who commanded the Joint Security Forces to massacre Ugandans on Kampala streets? Has he ever been punished? Why are they not sanctioning him? Why are they cherry picking the people they are sanctioning and they are not saying anything about it? If they are to mean business, let them do it and we see it.
Thank you so much. Honorable Joseph, reading from an article you authored on the 25th of April 2021, and this was around the time former IGP Kale Kaihura was sanctioned, talk about Colonel Abel Kandi at the time. You say, part of your writing says, and I'll read from it, the United States, the country that provides more than $1 billion per annum to Uganda, the country without whose support over the last 35 years this regime would be absent. Military equipment that sings across this country, East Central, Horn of Africa, with Mr. Museveni at the helm as Nyampala, minimally, except to calm down the voice of opposition, they have shyly elected to send him a little love note to the naughty corner.
Mm-hmm.
You seem so underlooking on what the United States did at the time. You think they should have done better?
They did badly then. They're doing badly today. In fact, they're doing not enough. And I'm actually shocked and surprised that the Ugandans who claim to be independent Ugandan citizens and people who profess interest for the future of this country, who actually seek to want to, play games with Mr. Museveni on the argument, tiny little, very cheeky argument, that USA is a sovereign country and Uganda is a sovereign country, and the United States should not, quote, meddle on the affairs of the Republic of Uganda. That is cheeky. But the much more terrible element of it is when you get citizens of this country who profess to be citizens of this country, seeking to explain away by claiming that, oh, the US is the #1 human rights abuser in the world, and why are they concerned about us? That is extremely unfortunate because, yes, when you put it from the point of view of what the background my colleagues gave, particularly the latter bit by Miriam, yes, granted, America has got its own shortcomings. And in fact, I've said before that the first major demonstration I part-led, I think I was the #2 in the organization, was Makerere University demonstration against the US when they bombed Benghazi, I think at the time, where I think Gaddafi lost a child. Gaddafi had then just concluded his support for Idi Amin. He was extremely unpopular in this country. I'm surprised that actually the things named after Gaddafi these days. That's the contradictions amongst Africans, contradictions amongst Ugandans, and how short-sighted sometimes we can be. But at the time, on principle, I was simply saying that, well, although Gaddafi, for information and for the viewers' interest, Gaddafi was the #1 backer of Idi Amin when he was butchering our people in this country, and so. But when Amin and Gaddafi were humiliated by the combined forces of the Ugandan liberators backed by Tanzania, things changed. And the other thing is Gaddafi at the time could not believe that these guys who humiliated him were now in charge. He's not surprised that they went ahead and supported Museveni. I'm giving contextual background, particularly the senior lecturer, he would be interested in that. So Gaddafi then supported the Musevenis in the name of supporting an enemy to an enemy. He's a friend. And that's the background of the Libyans' actual support for the NRM banditry in Luwero bushes and the streets of Kampala. But fast forward, on principle, we were saying as Ugandans at the time that regardless of what Gaddafi did to Uganda, at the time, with Idi Amin, it was wrong for America to do. So we're taking the broader global principle and then to an Africanist view on that. So we did. So I'm not particularly a kind friend of American foreign policy. If anything, fast forward beyond that, the second demonstration in which we participated in Miriam was when Samora Machel died, if I can recall. And we're then demanding that Mr. Museveni needed to very quickly make a statement. He was too slow to make a statement on Samora Machel. Samora Machel had been killed quite clearly by the apartheid regime in that aircraft, and apartheid was then massively backed by the Americans. And talking about that, the first time I learned about this big word sanctions as young students, much younger than yourselves, were for those of us who were then very progressively left students from secondary school. And the rest of the world was demanding for arms sanctions against South Africa, because of apartheid policy. And the time, the key opponents of sanctions against South Africa were, in my more recent age, was American President then, Ronald Reagan, and a very difficult lady, Margaret Thatcher in Britain, both of whom are not necessarily my friends. And of course, as Speaker, some with the privilege of access to right to vote in the United Kingdom, and some openly fundamentally opposed to Margaret Thatcher and her party and her government, and I'll go ahead and further campaign on that. So this talk sanctions. So this guy's foreign policy would be neither here nor there. But let me fast forward. The most common one, of course, is when America went to Iraq, and it was backed by Bush and Blair. Blair, who was then the prime minister of the party that I supported, and I was a senior official in the Labour Party. And I remember holding a very difficult meeting, the parliamentary, constituency meeting, parliamentary constituency meeting of the Labour Party, where Blair was trying to seek mandate to to go and bomb Iraq, and we were fundamentally opposed to it. I was one of the people who went in the streets of London again and again and again against America, against the Blair-backed support for the war in Iraq. Until today, in principle, I would back a situation in which Bush and Blair are possibly tried and held to account with these matters. That said, those are those guys. When it comes back to my republic, I still continuously say that we need perhaps to ask ourselves who are the key human rights abusers in this country, particularly in Luweero. My party was in government. I have said that we need to have an open investigation, on Luweero. We want to know who killed who in Luweero. And so therefore, do we hold UPC government responsible? Do we hold Mr. Museveni responsible? Fast forward, I've taken the view that, well, we can go ahead and talk National Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Fast forward to where we are today. After the criminal events in Luweero involving Museveni, led by Museveni, because Museveni went to Luweero, government only followed him there. We can have a discussion of that. That in 2021, I could see in the streets of Kampala a massive rape and abuse of the citizens of this country following an election, simply because emergent young guys like yourselves were seeking to challenge the authority of NRA. It's criminal. And from then, fast forward to today, to then go ahead and in many of our cases say, oh, America cannot talk, when we know and we see what's happening in our own country. So this is a debate about Ugandans. So I'm actually engaging the conscience of ordinary Ugandans, that no, we should stop, playing games with the devil, and we should stop hiding behind certain nuances in trying to justify or cover up what is happening here. That actually takes an American government to say, as Miriam says, that no, what you're doing is not funny, is a ringing indictment of 40 years of NRA. And fast forward, just to conclude this very particular bit, I know the cheeky thing that NRA runs with, every other time we're talking this round of sanctions, we always talk about homosexuality bill and this homosexuality bill. And we say, and as Miriam said, these sanctions are a result of human rights abuses in this country. And it was about horrific, generic human rights abuses by the NRA state, by the NRA police. And there's also an element of corruption. Uganda is amongst the most corrupt countries on earth, is a fact. And then next, human rights abuses, which includes anti-homosexuality on people, on sexuality issues, but the others on civil society, and the others on you guys in the media, and the others beating up female members of parliament, female legislators in the streets of Kampala. America and others see these things on your television networks. And then for America to take a position, say, these funny friends of ours whom we made, some cheeky, spoiled old boys called Museveni and this group, who now with impunity think they can do whatever they do. Okay, now we just withdraw the sweets. That's all they've done.
Thank you so much, Honorable, for that. And what they say is, this is basically human rights, and these people are concerned about what is happening in the country and the world at large. But when you look around the world, there are other nations that have similar challenges. And when we talk nations, the example of Zimbabwe, they have been under sanctions from the United States for a very long time. This country has not seen that in the many years Zimbabwe has seen it. But when we fly out of this continent, go to Saudi Arabia, go to countries like Israel, the things they accuse Ugandans, the things they accuse Zimbabweans of doing, these people are doing them. And these countries are partnering with them, they are exploring the oil with them, they are giving them money. What is the basis of sanctions? Is it human rights or it's politics?
Philip, you need to understand the world order. You see, the tragedy in Zimbabwe came from the apex of Cold War. Because Zimbabwe, it started with the Cold War, and which Cold War put in the issue of apartheid in South Africa, and even in Zimbabwe there was some form of apartheid.
It was, yeah.
And Rhodes. So Zimbabwe's story has been long, because you find that the issue of land, which is a backbone of that conflict, started with apartheid, where some characters came and took land which was for Africans and declared it that it was their land. Of course, the way Mugabe handled the matter also was problematic, but you cannot excuse the apartheid people. So the British and the Americans were supporters of apartheid, and they supported the right-wing capitalists in South Africa and all other places. Of course, people were being killed in Congo. There was Mugabe, there was Mobutu Sese Seko, there was Kamuzu Banda in Malawi, and so many others in many places. But Zimbabwe took that beating because for them they came out outrightly, and under Mugabe said, Zimbabwe is for Zimbabweans and let the whites go away. And that really angered the supporters of apartheid. Now, if you compare that with the other human rights abusers in Africa, I think the world order has been too technical. For example, when Obama became a president, many of us were very expectant that something very serious was going to be done to Uganda. But unfortunately, the Somali issue came up. And when the Somali issue came up, and then the Congo issue, the Congo issue. And our president is normally very careful and is cunning in diplomatic dealings. He offered himself. Almost nobody was offering an army to go and fight in Somalia. The president offered himself. He said, through as a gesture of Pan-Africanism, I can do it. But when I looked at his body language carefully, it was not a Pan-African thing. I remember the first meeting of our president with the Barack Obama in the Security Council took 8 minutes. I had never seen a scared president like President Museveni then. It was only 8 minutes. He was given to speak, and he spoke for 2 minutes. Uncharacteristic of Yoweri Museveni. He thanked him and he stopped there. He didn't want to say anything because he was not sure of what Obama was going to come up with as a foreign policy for America. But thanks to the trouble in America, in Somalia, we took there our soldiers who are still there up to today, yet their tenure there even elapsed. And America changed very drastically against Uganda. Because I remember that was after a very serious election also in Uganda here, where so many people were maimed during that election and so many things had happened. Besigye was a constant man. I think even, I don't know why this Guinness Book record don't consider him, because he's a man who has been charged in court of law. I don't think there is anybody higher than him. You are charged here from Nagalama, they take you to this one. So there was a lot of hope that America was going to come here and do something. But because of what the Yoweri Museveni did cleverly, they changed their mind and became their darling. Of course, when the next government came on of Trump, he said he was going to kill him. He said he was going to kill Museveni and kill Bashir, but Trump was never serious. He was really a joker. He was just a guy joking around the television. But the American, the American geopolitical situation has never changed. For them, they only deal with people who are opposed to American interests at that time. I don't want to say that the interests have changed. The interests have not changed. But I think in the long run, America is getting new friends in the region and who are slowly replacing Uganda. An example is Rwanda, because Rwanda has had a lot of problems with the French and is even moving away from Anglophone, from Francophone to Anglophone relationship, and America is the biggest darling. And thanks to his army, he has owned a lot of power. For example, Rwanda controls a lot of geopolitics in the DRC. They are really, in fact, for me, I normally think they are the fulcrum. If they decided that there shouldn't be conflict in DRC, it would stop. And therefore, America is interested in that. Secondly, you find that America is having a lot of problems with the Chinese Revolution in Africa. Just as I was talking here, I was reading the news today. China has given Ugandan government 70 vehicles for free to organize the non-alignment thing, movement. And there is a way this is putting America on the sidelines of geopolitical relationship. And therefore, if you have already started losing something, there is nothing much to protect. You need now to show your colors. In my view, it is even somebody showing blue eyes that, excuse me, I can get serious. And you know, America controls the World Bank, it controls the IMF, and you have seen what the World Bank has already done. The sanctions have come at a time when the geopolitical relations between Uganda and the United States are slightly changing. For some time, 10 years or so, these have been two darlings working together in areas of pacification of the region, Great Lakes region, and many things. But with the time, another player has come into the arena, and that is Rwanda. Rwanda has gained a lot of geopolitical relationship with the United States, having declared poor relationship with the French and the Francophone. So the Americans have found another party. But secondly, also the issue of China, the Chinese relations in Africa. And Chinese, they are coming without any condition. They are giving, they are almost commercial lenders in Africa. They are lending in most of the constructions. They are encouraging military operations without conditions. In fact, for them, they are lovers without conditions. They give love without conditions. I was saying that this morning, the Chinese government has just announced 70 vehicles for Uganda, free, to help them in organizing the non-alignment movement. That cannot come easily with the United States without some conditions. So there is a way Uganda and China have become so many so much friends, and the US is becoming uncomfortable, and because of that now has also to raise their voice and say, excuse me, you are now abusing human rights and so many other things. But it doesn't mean that before all these years, the United States has not been seeing the abuse of human rights. The abuse of human rights has been a serious issue in Uganda here. You remember during the NRA time, NRA was one of the armies that really abused human rights, including using child soldiers. I did not see how much the US did. The government came in. They, in fact, Clinton called the NRA then leader the beacon of Africa. And the beacon was Yoweri Museveni, Kagame, then the president of Eritrea, and so many others. I don't think that still they have that view up today. It has just been a marriage of convenience. So the United States will come to Uganda or to any African country depending on their geopolitical agenda in their foreign policy. The foreign policy for America, by the way, does not change, whether under Republican or Democratic. It is America first, then the rest second. Only that the approach is what changes. The one is more militaristic and the other one is more diplomatic. So the Republicans normally want to fight. I mean, no, the Democrats want to fight, but they begin with sanctions, and I don't think they are going to fight Uganda. Really, Uganda, there is no need to fight in Uganda. They will just, for example, I was just checking the Ugandan government by the end of, because we have not yet done for this year, by the end of last year, 2022, we were importing arms and ammunitions valued 48 million US dollars. If any country is giving you that amount of that money, it's not just a country that you can joke with. 48 million US dollars per annum. You cannot just joke with such a country. Now, these arms, when they are coming to Uganda here or to any part of Africa, yes, for defense and security, but the bigger part is is used in abuse of human rights. Tear gas, these things which are used to do all horrendous things here. So I really feel that it is not that they have now realized that there is a lot of abuse of human rights. But for me, I tend to think that the relationship is changing gradually, and the United States is getting other friends. For example, if you check 20 years ago, the friendship of the United States and Kenya is not the same. And the explanation is the same thing that I've given.
Thank you so much, Doctor. And viewer, we're joined by, from the NRM, retired Major Awich Pollar, who is the Director, External Affairs. Major, you're most welcome to the show.
Thank you, and I'm really sorry for being late. Always, it is not in the behavior of the revolutionary NRM to be late.
Apologies accepted. I want to pick your general reception as the NRM of the sanctions put to individuals in Uganda. We hope you're not one of them, and the country at large.
Just a little touch on the wrist.
First of all, I looked at the design of the topic, and I was not satisfied with it.
Typical NRM.
The topic is saying the impact of sanctions.
Yes.
Can you read it for me?
The
impact of sanctions on the deteriorating
human rights record of
human
the
rights.
country and runaway corruption.
That the impact of U.S. sanctions against human rights, deteriorating human rights record and runaway corruption. I have an issue with the topic. One, I did legal drafting, and I was taught by the wife of the Chief Justice of Windolo, Madame Nakachwa, who is now a judge of the High Court. If you put this drafting to Nakachwa, she would give you a 0. Because first of all, are we investigating the impact on human rights or the impact because of the sanction is because of human rights? That the impact of U.S. sanctions against Uganda's deteriorating human rights record, and so is the impact against these two.
No.
Anyway, be that as it is, it's already biased that you are saying whoever coined it is already assuming and asserting that indeed there is a deteriorating human rights,
no court of law,
and then there's a runaway corruption.
And this is
So
not even Security
is
Council,
that,
my brother.
My view is that we could make a better and a healthy discussion in Uganda, and we shall continue to engage. It would have sufficed to say the sanction against Uganda. Then you leave the reasons. Or on the alleged human rights abuse. But if we are already judged, and we have judged that concluded it is unfair. So I want to register my complaint about the coinage of our topic. We should have, at the very best, you just say about the status of human rights. Then whoever is talking about it knows what is the status. Is it good? Is it bad?
Tell us what you know then.
For me, I have no problem with the topic.
The topic is biased and grammatically wrong. Biased and grammatically wrong. Now,
that is UPE and Mr. Museveni and Mrs. Museveni, 40 years.
We are not
now,
English.
the impact. The impact is definitely there. Some of it may turn out to be positive and some are negative. So I don't know whether I would have the liberty to separate on individuals and country, but I will interest myself on the country. than the individuals. The individuals, of course, the impact is that these sanctions work, and some people think they don't. I have worked in UN for 8 years. I know how biting it is. You see, take it like this. If UN, which America uses, actually UN borrows from America, if they want to do something like a sanction, they'll commission that task to a research professor. Said, write us, like a professor in that expertise, either statistics or whatever, said, we want you to produce us a document on how, if we sanction Mr. X, we would sanction effectively. This work are done by some expert professors and given to government to own it.
Yes.
Or given to in UN to own it.
With facts.
You will find that they'll say, if we sanction Mr. X, even if you go to print an air ticket, it won't print. Because already your biodata is known in the passport. If you went to the bank with a check, it won't print. So they really cripple, they work. People think it is a political statement. No. Remember also that the banks in the world is controlled from America. Okay, the banks are controlled there. So these sanctions that America does, or United Nations does, it is actually a well thought out issue that they give to a professor so-and-so at Harvard University. He develops it like his product and is paid money for it. And there's no professor who is going to be paid dollars and dollars who will sit in his study room and make a substandard work. So it works. And so for individual, it's very risky. You better not get yourself there. It's very risky. Now, for the country that I interest myself, is that it will, of course, go to budget support. It will affect our budget support where they do. There was a time in this discussion we tried to check out from various ministries, and we fished out and we found where the US money really go. Sometimes you don't see it by your eyes. In fact, I once raised that it needs an economist to fish out what America does. And yet for the Chinese, it's so open. But be as it is not seen, it is reflected in the activities. China, their support is clear. For example, recently I had a Chinese Foreign Affairs Minister who was a member of the highest party organ, what we call SEC here. So I had the duty to pick him from the airport, and I had a high level like the Mike Mukula to help me pick him at the airport. The airport that we were sat in was being renovated by Chinese money. The vehicle that I had asked from Foreign Affairs was a Chinese car. The road that we drove off had thing to do with Chinese. Nice. The next day, the president was in South Africa. I took them to meet Her Excellency Alupo. The meeting we had, the Twin Towers, was a Chinese house. So China, their support is seen and known. And that's why they rapidly develop infrastructure. But America is not seen. So this budget support will be affected. Be as it is not as visible as the Chinese support. Of course, the effect would be that the America would expect an obedience. It's like somebody who has the tap and wants to squeeze it so that you say, sir.
Reform.
Sir, whatever it is, they will want obedience. So whether they will extract it, we are yet to wait to see. There is also they expect to get an impact on the people's support. But this one again, we are yet to see how it works. In my opinion, it has failed. For example, Cuba. For over 60 years, America has put Cuba on sanctions. The idea, according to the simple calculation by CIA, was put Cubans on sanctions, squeeze them economically, they will rise and overthrow the communist regime of Cuba. Fidel stayed, he died, there was no insurrection. His brother came, he stayed, he left, there was no insurrection. There's now a young man. So sometimes the people, when they see that the America are really acting unjustifiably, it instead acts to solidify the support. And that is what I was saying, that we are yet to see if this impact will generate that. It failed to generate in Cuba. And Cuba is just a few kilometers away from Cuba. To the extent that even during Corona, oxygen, America squeezed Cuba not to get oxygen. But people moved on. and supported the government. They strongly believed that this was a revolutionary cause for the Cubans, and they thought they were being unfairly handled. And that economic sanctions, the desired goal on Cuba didn't work. So maybe we'll take from the leaf in Cuba to what extent that sanctions actually make people raise against their government. It depends on what the people see that government to be. It will also, one of the impact is that it will give us freedom to choose what we want. Because if you are my neighbor, and I always get support from you to buy posho, to buy beans, to buy meat, to buy chicken, and I know that today you have stopped giving me. Remember when you were giving me all this, you even had the right to ask me why I come late in my home. Because I borrow from you, I give you. You even have the right to ask me why my children cry late at night. Because you give me money. But when I know you don't give me now, and then I will do what I can do. I can come late the way I want. In other words, I choose now my democratic ways of behavior. I'm now not acting in any fear. The other impact could be that it would also act as make us, if we agree, because the grounds which they raise are known. Good enough, those are some of the prohibitive grounds that we also know, like human rights. And that is why we have put it in laws that if you are a policeman and you go to arrest and you break a leg of somebody, it's not enough for you now to raise what formerly used to be called the defense of the Attorney General, that I went to arrest Okello, Okello resists, I broke his leg. You sue Attorney General, I was doing the work. Right now, the law says you are personally liable. And even in the army, the defense of a superior command doesn't work. So what this will make us do is to check, now that we have the political will, can we make sure the laws are working? Can we follow? For example, this recent move, this thing on the WhatsApp where I'm told the Giso was making some soldiers beat a civilian, I think we all saw it, that he had stolen a motorcycle. Even if he had killed, is that the way to do it? And those are the things which make us lose marks in the eyes of our peers. Now, whatever this one it takes may also make us now check, have we been complacent with our enforcement of laws about human rights? We have the laws, we have the institutions, we have the bodies. Have we been checking enough? Can we do more for the civilized community to know? So this is some of the broad impact that we would have in the face of the American sanctions.
Thank you so much, Major. And briefly, I want to engage you on one of the points you just made. You said if you have a neighbor and he's giving you money and he questions why you beat your children at home, why you come late at home or something like that.
I didn't say beat your children. Why your child cries later.
Yes, thank you for that correction.
I am very mindful of my words.
And you say, should this neighbor stop giving you money, then you will have the right to do what you want without anyone to question. Are you trying to say that since the US is saying stop abusing the rights of Ugandans, if it stops giving you money, then the government of Uganda is free to abuse the rights the way it sees because no one will call it to order?
Is that your question?
Yes.
No. I just answer you no.
Good.
Because you really want to twist it, but the simple answer is no. I told you I'm so mindful of my words. For example, if there was regulation on civil service recruitment, and part of the conditions are that through whatever means, if now I'm not dealing with you, I'll say, okay, I feel I have to recruit much more. Let's say I had a battalion or had 1,000 teachers. Remember in public service in Wandiga, there's a white man who monitors payroll. He sits there. Okay, in public service, in the Ministry of Public Service. So there's a white man who does it. So if I'm now free from you, then I'm free to increase the public service or not. Okay? It's not about human rights. There's so many silent issues that we are prohibited from that you don't see, which you can now do at your own. Even choices of priority. Choices of priority. You are told that, fine, this is the economic thing, but we want you to do this, including choice of crops. For example, they'll tell you, we want modified, genetically modified seeds. Don't get any other ordinary seeds. So if you are not giving me, then I will be free to choose the seeds. I will be free to recruit the way I want. It's not about a violation of human rights. I don't know why your mind is bent.
Major, are you saying the NRM is not taking independent decisions for
There's
this?
so many
they've never-
silent
they've
issues
never
you don't
been.
see. There are so many silent issues you don't see,
It's a Nyamala
including
regime.
controlling of payroll.
Is Museveni a puppet of
Thank you so
USA?
much. Thank you so much. And I want to engage you, Madam Miriam Kyomugasho, on that particular issue. Earlier in the conversation, you did talk about Uganda disobeying international laws. And I want you to help us draw the thin line between international laws, obeying them, and the sovereignty of a country like Uganda.
I think there are international laws
Excuse me,
that
I missed that. I wish you could say
Yes.
those laws which have been disobeyed,
Yes.
because it was said
He
before.
likes law when he hears the word
Especially
law there.
international law.
I'm not so legal, so I won't go legal, but I can say that. So our country ratified some statutes that abide us all as global citizens, and the human rights, the universal human rights, are part of those statutes. So Uganda is a signatory to that, and even in our constitution, we also confess and profess to really uphold those laws and rules and that concern the human rights of individuals as a nation. So if you violate those human rights and someone is saying, hey, you are violating the human rights, you see, ideally, nobody should be telling us that we are violating the rights of our own people. So USA coming out to say, hey, neighbor, that's too much. That's too much. That's too excessive. We should be upholding the rights of our own citizens, and we should be policing ourselves. We have the institutions in Uganda, like the police, the parliament, the legislature, the judiciary, which are responsible to uphold our constitution, to uphold the rights of individuals as Ugandans, to protect us as citizens, our rights, our property, and those institutions definitely are not doing their job. That's why we have neighbors calling us out. So if you said that our sovereignty, what is our sovereignty? What do we confess as Ugandans? Are we butchers? Are we kidnappers? Are we killers? What are we? What did we sign to do? What do we say we do? What are the rights of Ugandans that the Ugandan government is supposed to uphold? So the USA sanctioning us really should be irrelevant to us as a country. We should be debating, how are we protecting the rights of Ugandans as Ugandan people? What is the role of the government in upholding the rights of Ugandans, not abusing the rights of Ugandans? And Mr. Captain,
Major Awich.
Major Awich talked about the Ugandan. There is a law against torture in the Ugandan constitution for the security officers, which was put in to hold the security of individual officers accountable for the violations of the rights of the citizens they are in charge of. But I'm yet to see, Major Awich, I'm yet to see the UPDF, the Uganda police, disciplining any officer who kidnaps Ugandans, who tortures Ugandans, who killed, especially the soldiers who killed the Ugandans during towards the 2021 elections. Who was the person who commanded the joint security forces that led to the massacre of more than 50 Ugandans on November 2020? Did he ever face any discipline? Because at one point, I think the president said that those people were disciplined internally. But who are they? And were they ever disciplined? So let us not blame or just hide our shame behind the US and, the sovereignty kind of the blanket and saying, hey, we Ugandans, you're not supposed to talk about us. We can handle our own affairs. How are we handling our affairs? Are we doing the right thing? Are we covering up for those abuses? Are the police officers, the ones who are supposed to uphold the rights of Ugandans, the ones abusing those rights of the
They are
individuals?
number one human rights abuser in Uganda, and they do this themselves.
Yes.
Who?
So
Police.
who is going to check us? Who is going to check them for us as citizens? Who is going to police the police? If the president is not bothered, the president is the commander-in-chief of all the security officers. If he's not bothered about disciplining his officers, who is going to do it for us? So actually for me, I applaud the US for coming out and say, even by the way, the European Parliament at one point raised the issues. They had a long list of the list. They said these are really gross abuse of human rights. So the whole world is watching us and they're pointing fingers. But what about us Ugandans? Are we holding our government accountable for the gross abuse of human rights? Why should we wait for the neighbors?
Thank you so much, Lady Anna. I want to come to you, Honorable Joseph. Major raises a very important issue of concern in the name of interference. He says these people determine a couple of things in our public service, in our agriculture, in our security. That is interference.
And Kumbe, there's even some white person in some ministry. What
Some
ministry?
He said
Some white
public
person in some
service.
ministry.
Even in the Ministry of Finance,
Yes.
they are there.
So there are some white people there,
And in
some non-Ugandans.
They are not
Do we
white.
need these
They
people
are
in these
foreigners.
ministries?
No, we don't. We told you, UPC told you, and we told you for the last 40 years, we've been shouting, telling Ugandans that you guys, you are under bondage of NRA, Mr. Museveni, the Western Yampala, on behalf of Anglo-America. It has been officially stated here.
Which means you didn't know.
It has, I'm trying to emphasize. You see, thank you, my brother. No, I'm just trying to say they should listen. No, it's extraordinary. The sovereignty thing is my foot. As I said at the introductory level, that Ugandans basically need to wake up, that they're literally in bondage on behalf of external self-interest, with Mr. Museveni as the enabler. Let me tell a small little story. Once upon a time, at the peak of some of our campaigns to expose NRA atrocities, particularly in northern Uganda, and to expose to the ordinary voters, who support these bushes of their worlds, because usually their voters are very sensible, particularly the young ones are very progressive, and I've said it on this program. Predominantly young and women, young and female citizens of global north. They're usually generally very open-minded, very progressive, and they genuinely, predominantly care about what happens in the rest of the world, and including their solidarity to Africa. And in fact, in most cases, if they knew the criminal atrocities the regimes in the global south commit on the name of the interests of their governments, they would normally go to those streets. And in many cases, those governments fall.
Yeah.
They actually are able to bring down their regimes, their governments, if they know in the majority form that their governments, in their own name, are supporting abusive regimes like NRA has been on their behalf. So in the peak of doing that,
Demonstrate with examples.
in the peak of that,
Zimbabwe.
I visited a senior diplomat, an African
Zimbabwe
diplomat,
wasn't.
in their offices in London. This officer told me, this for my memoirs, but I'll just give a bit of headlines, that look, the previous month had escorted their foreign minister, their foreign and finance ministers, to an IMF World Bank meeting in the States. He had been asked. And in that meeting, they found, now I think I'll cover the name of this particular top British minister, very good friend of Museveni. Museveni knows the person I'm talking about, And in that board meeting, and the guy tells me that, well, in that meeting, they were told, this is an open thing, they were told that if you want us to support you, on this kind of programs you want. If you want to support you, do what Mr. Museveni is doing.
Oh.
It was as open as that. Do what Uganda is doing, Mr. Museveni is doing.
And what was he doing?
And it obviously, this guy, general said, it sort of didn't make sense to them. They looked at each other and they said that his foreign minister was more puzzled than the finance minister. You know, so in a fast forward, they left and they came to realize that, oh, you have to be a perfect Nyampala in this guy's interests in order for them to just to release for you. So IMF and World Bank to sing and dance and whatever kind of stuff, and then they walk. So it's very interesting that the other day, Mr. Museveni said in response to these sanctions thing, that for him, when he goes to America, he's doing them a favor. That was
Who was bluffing?
you know, that was who really. So in a way, he was saying that, I think, in part, inside him, he knows that maybe it's tickling the other people, but it's actually not true, because I think, as Dr. Ojambo said, no, these guys' foreign policy positions are a constant. You reach a certain stage, you've been used, you are dumped, and then they'll move on. And that sort of is the nearest thing that is happening in Uganda. The NRA guys picked on impunity. Mr. Museveni, when it came to the questions of and particularly the anti-homosexuality legislation, I have argued there was necessarily no need for them to go that extra mile on it. But Museveni knew that anti-homosexuality is very popular in the country, so he could possibly take a bluff on these guys. Now, my information has it that the US president tried to beg Mr. Museveni, and possibly not go too much detail, to beg Mr. Museveni not to go that extra mile, partly because of their Anglo-American voters thing, and it was neither here nor there. No, fast forward to where we are at the moment. These sanctions things, I'm glad that Comrade Awich agrees that it impacts on our country, it impacts on our image, it impacts on the ordinary citizens, and it impacts on the personalities involved. I don't know why Mr. Museveni doesn't appoint Comrade Awich as Minister of Foreign Affairs. Because he's fairly balanced. Sometimes very unrealistic, very unreasonable, very unfair, but is fairly broadly objective. You know, to the extent
Don't you know the party is above the government?
Don't you know, to the extent that my other OB, Mwiri OB, Henry Riem, sometimes can be as dismissive as his boss, Mr. Museveni, but those that are keen on their appointed thing. They're rather dismissive about this thing. No, these sanctions work. They work on the individuals and personalities. They work on their families. Sometimes most of their family members are innocent people. They work on related institutions, and they work on the image of our country. And it's sad, absolutely unnecessary. But the contradictions, though, as I said, is we're demanding for sanctions against apartheid regime, and Anglo-America were saying no. When it came to the question of sanctions in Zimbabwe, the sanctions in Zimbabwe were not sanctions against Mr. Mugabe, and I'm one of those people who supported and argued in defense of Mugabe at very difficult times when it was convenient, including for people like Ugandan bishops, St. Tammuz, to pull off their cloth against Mugabe when actually a regime in his own native country was committing horrendous human rights abuse and they're keeping quiet. What contradictions, what hypocrisy. The Mugabe thing, as has been suggested, was quite clearly Zimbabwean government taking sovereignty and saying enough is enough. The push on the land, the deal that we tried to play with you, Midland was not forthcoming. You want to go ahead and dictate on us. This country needs to reach a stage in which we behave like UPC did. That look, these are our national interest. This is our strategic regional interest. Globally, this is where we as a progressive left political party, this is how far we are prepared to go with you, Anglo-America, and push it on the open, rather than doing yes, no kind of system. Those have, if you don't mind, I know you could, those have consequences. And in many cases, you rather lose a government like we lost a government in trying to defend apartheid South Africa, anti-apartheid, defending Southern African peoples and defending the people of Congo, than to become a regime that quite clearly people who are signing your checks in your foreign affairs ministries are dubious foreigners. In many cases, actually some mafias. And we are clapping, saying, yes, Mr. Museveni, nyongo, no change.
Thank you so much, Honorable Joseph. I want to come to Dr. Ojambo here. The two gentlemen raise very interesting but worrying statements. He says we even have individuals in our ministries and our offices operating on behalf of other nations, and the Honorable Ochieno even gives a diplomatic example, a story where a diplomat says they were told to operate like President Museveni. What is the status of colonialism in Uganda?
Yeah, for we normally teach our small kids in the senior 2 and the senior 3 that the colonialists gave us independence through the door and took it away through the windows in form of neocolonialism. A word that was coined by the great Kwame Nkrumah. Now, neocolonialism, unlike independence, I mean the earlier colonial power before independence, where power was shown by the Union Jack and a garrison of soldiers in a certain place, or officers and the portrait of the king or the queen somewhere. Neocolonialism normally is in actions. It's indirect. It comes, for example, there is no way you would expect your government to act independently when the people are not. Look at all people in Uganda, there is none who does not profess colonialism in the way they eat, in the way they dress, in the way they worship, in the way they do everything. Look at the language we are speaking. We are really colonialists indirectly. We are speaking English here. We should be speaking our languages. We don't. Our children now don't know our languages. Look at every Ugandan has another name. Philip, Robert, I don't know which one. That is neocolonialism. So even in government, there is where independence stops and the colonial interests begin everywhere. Look at the budgeting system, look at the military system. Why don't we come up with our own military systems? Look at the court system. The court system in Uganda is a colonial thing. When you go to the courts of law, the way they are hyped, you may think they are very important places. But when you listen to them, they are really jokers. Some of our village arbitration methods were better. Because you find somebody because he's technical and he wins the case when everybody saw the other one doing the thing. And they said there is no evidence. I said, that evidence was not prepared, but you must prepare it in form of affidavit, I don't know what, presented by some guy putting on funny things. So I cannot argue with them. Those guys are there, but it's not an excuse. It's not an excuse for any government not to do whatever it's supposed to do properly, because there are some, nobody votes in Uganda here that white man at public service. I didn't even know. I think we need to go and smoke him out and chase him away if we had a way. But you see, geopolitics, as I started, politics is a very interesting thing. I can tell you for a fact that Museveni was speaking yesterday, I think it was yesterday, on TV and showing that he's not bothered with these sanctions. But I know after that time, he's going to go at midnight and do a midnight call to somebody in the US, and they will talk a lot of things geopolitically. What they say on TV is different from what they say in boardrooms. And Museveni is very good at that, not only with the colonialists, even with his other people. And the way he would abuse Mao is different from when they are on a one-to-one discussing issues of Acholi and how they can get that place onto the NRM plate to be eaten. So I really want to feel that it is true, neocolonialism is real, but no leader should be given an excuse for perpetuating that. So for me, I really think that the sanctions, I want to agree with Major, that sanctions are going to act in two ways. The first one, the poor guy, Kaihura and those others, they are going to suffer. those ones are in trouble. Really, they're in terrible problems.
Scapegoats.
But those who are in government, those who are still in government, the likes of Kaihura, likes of those others will have issues. But the ones who are in government, they are going to talk for them. They are going to really say, this is not the guy who did the thing. And I'm very sure very soon some names will be dropped. Some names will be dropped. But those who will not have a good say and those who may not have the favor of the government may be paid. Sometimes I look at this as, you know, in our place we are fishermen. There is some fishing net called kokota. They throw it and it picks everything. So, but after you have picked, now you sort out what you want. So sometimes it is used, you never know. This may even be a plot of Ugandan government itself to punish some of the people who have gotten
Their
off the
own
road,
MPs.
or off the road. So in my view, it is true as Major Wich said, the individuals are going to suffer. But the country, I doubt. There is always something that will come in and the geopolitical situation will be corrected. There are going to be negotiations. For example, with the World Bank sanctions, there's already a headway. A lot of negotiations are going on, and you will hear that this one we have removed. USAID will still work in schools, but it will not support military operations. So it is just a ball game. You need to be very technical to understand how these countries work, especially when you are dealing with a country that is not sincere, like the United States of America. United States of America is not a very sincere country to deal with. You rather deal with the Chinese. For them, they come, they present themselves as dictators, so you only support their things, or if you don't, they are with you. But United States, they are normally very tricky people.
Just 30 seconds, really. It's very interesting what you're saying about the politics of it. It might be slightly far-fetched to suggest that maybe it's being done by NRM. Quite clearly, there is something going on, and it's a big thing. And it may actually get bigger. And we're just saying that, well, we don't know how far big it goes, because if it doesn't go as big as Mr. Museveni, then it will be a waste of time, you know, in the bigger scheme of things. But quickly, I know already cases where there are individuals who've been victimized for nothing. I know cases where names may have made rounds. I don't go too much details. Within certain institutions, where again a very high-ranking public official was pushed in a particular direction to maybe local politics, either partly corruption or the patronage system, which is very worrying. I know one, and it's very sad. But finally, the impact of these sanctions, I know cases where there are people who were refused visas within the last 1 week going to America, and there are people who are actually victims of northern Ugandan war as part of a delegation. And these people lost not only their visa, and I'm told part of the argument was talked about the delays in the US process, but people link this with some of the sanctions decisions. So that becomes counterproductive. So counterproductive. So one, the US guys may not have done it as well, but two, on the other hand, some of our own weak systems may already be impacting very, 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 very innocent people.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for that. And you, thank you so much for keeping it the Citizens Church on Civic Space TV. We are heading to a very short break, and we shall be right back.
National Water and Sewage Corporation is committed to providing cost-effective, clean, safe, and reliable quality water and sewage solutions in urban centers across Uganda. National Water and Sewage Corporation reaffirms its commitment to 100% service coverage, geographical expansion, infrastructure development, water quality, pro-poor initiatives, customer care and stakeholder engagement, catchment, and water source protection. Be a water hero. Pay your bills to zero balance. Report all leaks, busts, and illegal water connections to enable us serve you better. Reach us through our toll-free numbers on 0800 200 977 or 0800 300 977. You can also communicate with us through any of our online platforms or visit the National Water and Sewage Corporation office nearest to you. This message is brought to you by National Water and Sewage Corporation.
You are still on Uganda's leading freedom platform, the Civic Space TV, and this is the Citizens Church Show. I am Phillip Muliisa. Today we are looking at the sanctions imposed by the government of the United States of America on individuals, but also the state of Uganda, and helping us understand what these sanctions are, but also their impact on the country and these individuals is a panel of distinguished citizens of this country. Retired Major Awich Pollar from the NRM, from the UPC, Honorable Joseph Ochieno, Madam Miriam Kyomugasho and Dr. Robert Ojambo here. Now,
For us, we don't have parties.
We don't have, we are neutral.
perhaps your party is Uganda, but
Yeah.
I want to begin this session by reading a tweet from the X account of the president of this country, and it is dated 22nd September 2019, and this was a time when the US had passed out sanctions on General Kale Kaihura, and he says, for the opposition that is celebrating US sanctions against General Kale Kaihura, it simply shows how poor the quality of their spectacles are when it comes to issues of Uganda and Africa. And I want to begin by engaging you, Dr. Ojambo, here. How should Ugandans, most certainly those that are not in government or are in opposition, most likely respond to things like sanctions once imposed on people in government?
In a sentence, first of all, the tweet you have just read, Museveni had to be angry because Kale Kaihura was working on whose behalf? Kale Kaihura was just an IGP of police in the government of Mr. Museveni. So when they are sanctioning Kale Kaihura, it's just that the president has sovereign rights, and to reach the level of Bashir to be sanctioned by the US is normally too much. So the president had to be angry, and the opposition must have been very happy because they were culprits of Kale Kaihura. If you have been alive in this country, Kale Kaihura is the man who militarized the police in Uganda. Of course, the project was started, and I normally hear, especially in this region, people being very apologetic, but the project was started by Edward Katumbo Wamala. That's the first time I saw policemen starting to shoot people. In Ochieno, there was a friend of mine called Igenyi. We were together at the university. He was shot in front of UPC building there. And that was the time of Katumbo Wamala. For the first time, I was really shocked because before that there was Odomel, Nono Kisembo, and then Odomel. Very nice policemen. They used to escort us from Makerere to go and demonstrate at the parliament and take us back. So long as we don't get rowdy, nothing would happen. But when Katumbo Wamala came, he started the project, then Kale Kaihura completed it. And Kale Kaihura turned Uganda into a war zone where policemen became warriors to fight citizens. That is the time we had Kiboko Squad. That is the time where we had this tear gas and painting people with the colored water, shooting to kill by police. Police for the first time was shooting people to kill. All sorts of things. For example, bordering almost criminal. You remember his relationship with the criminals like this man. Who? This man of Boda 2010.
I think he was,
in Rubaga Chitata and so many other people. So criminals joined the police. There was this recruitment of police as if they are recruiting scoutsmen, special police constables. Then there was
Chiboko Squad.
there was another
In
group.
short, Kaukumi.
Those guys, all criminals joined the police, in my view. If me, I spend a lot of my time in Kyambogo, so I know the people in Banda there who were criminals. All of a sudden, you would see them in police uniform. They are walking around in police uniform, committing all sorts of things, and so many other things. This Kale Kaihura was told, I am not yet sure, that he had a master's in law. This is the man who would send all sorts of people to even attack courts of law. They one time invited him for a court, something in Nakawa. He said, I can never step there. And he didn't go there. So, no, Nakawa. He was supposed to go on behalf of police to answer something. He said, I will never step there. And now, if you were a judge, it is police officers who take the accused people to courts. if the IGP rejects and refuses, then I don't know what the courts would do, because the courts don't have a military arm. So this is a man, really, for me, Kale Kaihura, I have no sympathy for him. He's a person really who put our country into a very bad picture. Almost, the man thought that he was a bad boy of the president. And I just pray that Uganda will never get another IGP like a Kale Kaihura. So in my view, I don't have any problem with him. I've never met this guy. I've never talked to him. But I really feel that he made our police to look very ugly. As a young man, I admired to be a police officer. And in 2000, I almost joined the police if I had not been appointed at the university as a teaching assistant. But I'm very sure I would have resigned during the time of Kale Kaihura, because there is no way I would serve a person who disregards any human rights, and yet should have been the defender of human rights, number one. Here he has a master's in human rights, but he must have studied in a wrong university. So in my view,
Makerere and London School.
in my view, the lecturers must have been meeting them when he had some.
When he was in Chankwanzi.
So in my view, yes, we normally argue, and on this I want to agree with the Major, that we normally argue that, you see, he's serving a government, but there is no way you would serve a government in the way Kale Kaihura was doing it. So I'm only shocked that, so the opposition had a right to really jubilate against Kale Kaihura. That is the time I saw really the opposition mimed and defeated almost. He's the one who sanctioned the banning of all these places. Like you can imagine right now, I cannot go and demonstrate at the Constitutional Square. Because for me, when I was growing up at the university, that was our place.
That's correct.
If we got angry, we go there.
The place to go and vent.
You demonstrate from there. When you get hungry, you go back home. And at least you are. But now you cannot go there. The black mamba, you remember the black mambas were introduced during that time. Plus this South African mambas now, which are packed in that same place, were introduced during that time. So this is that Chifesi is another one. Even formed some criminal gangs in our place called Chifesi. And the Chifesi has continued to affect our people up to today. If you pass on that northern bypass, they are there hitting people with the stones. So me, I really feel that the opposition was very right. And they are, like I said last time, the opposition do not do these things because they are just opposition. They are voices of so many of us who are quiet this side. Because, for example, what did Yoweri Museveni want us to do? That when Kale Kaihura is sanctioned by the US and any other body, that we go and cry for him? Cry for what? That because he's a Ugandan, should Ugandans commit crime? Any Ugandan who commits crime, I agree with Awich, should take personal responsibility. And that's why they were. So you asked the second part of the question in a sentence also. How should Ugandans always receive these sanctions or such statements? I think it also depends on how the sanctions have come. In most cases, majority of the Ugandans who are downtrodden start looking at this US, these other bodies as the only. Look at churches in Uganda. Churches are supposed to be places which fight for freedom, places which fight for fairness. In Uganda, the church is married with the dictators. You see these days, like there is one church I will not mention, where every bishop who is commissioned, he gets a car. And now, when they go to their pulpit, instead of telling the government that this one is an excess, this one is an excess, this one is an excess. For example, you remember the Catholic Church has done a lot of work. For example, the removal of these Mobutu Sese Seko and these people. The church was very strong. The Catholic Church in Congo, in Democratic. The soldiers had gone there and failed.
Even removal of Kabila.
Failed. But the church went and said, this cannot be possible. The church was very open. They said, we are preparing people to go to heaven, but we want them to go to heaven when they are not downtrodden. They're not downtrodden. And in many other places, the church in Uganda is as quiet as anything. The civil societies that were helping to agitate certain things in the public are now silenced. They were silenced with the sanctions, with so many things. Look at the other group which had protected the citizens would have been the academia. The academia. You remember in 1970s, the academias really suffered. That's why they had to go and kill a vice chancellor at Makerere University, because the academia was with the people. These days, you look at an academic, he goes to a platform like this and is speaking against the people. He uses a lot of technology, a lot of ideas and theories to work against the people. So who has remained? The opposition. So in most cases, if you walk on those streets, and I would like to invite you, and you walk on the streets of Kampala, people think that the opposition are the only group of people who have remained to talk for them. The rest of the guys are silent.
Thank you so much, Professor Robert. I want to come to you, Honorable Joseph. The UPC government was in power in this country twice, and many people will tell you a lot of challenges about your government. Had your individuals been sanctioned like we have them today in the NRM government, how would the UPC of Joseph Ochieno respond to sanctions?
I think Dr. Botte is a guy whom, particularly young people, are very unlucky. And you should, in many cases, hold Museveni responsible. Museveni and his group, including the people who made sure that Botte died prematurely miserably in exile, and meant people like the Roberts were not able to engage sufficiently with him. But I know that as president, he would have told people that take responsibility. One of the most interesting things was his speech in two parliamentary caucus in 1984. Was to tell members of parliament that when elections comes, prepare in the next 12 months, it's your job to go ahead and present your balance sheet, meaning you've got to go and engage the electorate. And when they dump you, you're not going to come to me. In Museveni's case, those ones who are dumped are given jobs as RDCs, new districts are created for them to add them onto, and I'm told there are new provisions to make sure that political failures continue to get privileges and protection on their behalf. And then number three, I think, looking back to early 1982, I know we were having a conversation about UPC's record in the 80s, where Obote had a meeting with the then official leader of the opposition, Dr. Samugera, and all religious leaders, as it were. And part of the conversation was human rights abuse allegations on Dowero. And in the detailed conversation, and I think I asked you to go and read Milton Obote's notes on concealment of genocide in Uganda, where he documents the atrocities by NRA and explains the UPC side. Good enough, I was too young to be your age, and so therefore wasn't there, but it doesn't matter for the record. All the issues were put on the table, not taking a defensive approach. And so part of the conversation then was that, look, let's put these matters on the table. The evidence of human rights abuses, let them be engaged, let's take them to the court, and let people responsible be held to account. To the extent that actually even in the electoral process, he was saying that, look, in the event that there was evidence about DP's claims and allegations, that he was prepared to resign, meaning the government to resign. Fast forward in context, I do not think that it should be a matter of comfort for any government when human rights abuses are being pushed against them. The only thing I can say from a UPC's perspective is that most of the abuses that were being presented, well, of course, were propaganda, as now evidence has shown. Don't forget that actually 3 days ago actually now, today, Friday, there's a report that I was looking at, and we were having conversations with groups of my friends, that is shocking that now Idi Amin is all of a sudden becoming amongst the most popular names in the Republic of Uganda. And not because Amin was a decent guy, but it's simply because, one, NRA has been around for such a long time, but two, NRA has committed so much human rights abuses, and the impunity of NRA is such that when Ugandans now look back, they think the other one is fair, not necessarily. So from a UPC perspective, we we had names and cases, and in many cases, basically propaganda. Don't forget the tiny Rolands who supported the Museveni's and the Gaddafis paid hugely propagandists abroad to paint a UPC government rather negatively. The BBCs of this world, the big Western media networks, indeed, and their political masters were particularly organized part to try and make sure that the then nationalist UPC government was brought down so that they're able to have a Nyampala regime like that of Mr. Museveni. That said, I am today one of those people who's asking that at the earliest possible time, maybe if Comrade Rich can join me on this, that we need to constitute a fresh roundtable conversation on to seek national political consensus. But beyond that, I'm also asking for a genuine neutral Truth and Reconciliation Commission to investigate human rights abuse under this NRA regime. Human rights abuses in the administrations in between UPC and NRA. And then UPC to administrations. Idi means inclusive, meaning human rights abuse across since independence. So that we're able to come out genuinely with what is factually established about horrendous human rights abuse in Uganda. Because I know part of what has been rather smartly placed, particularly by NRA and NRA propagandists, is that when we talk human rights, we talk sovereignty. Once we talk human rights abuse, we talk the past. So that as if anything that happened in the past, many of which were not necessarily true, is a justification of whatever's happening today. In others, I'm saying that unless you put a specific case in terms of human rights abuse under UPC administration, it's neither here nor there. But you know what? Under the last UPC administrations, at least even Obote too, when this bunch of NRAs were busy breaking people's necks in Luweero, there are no cases of members of parliament being whipped. There are no cases of parliament of opposition leaders in Obote too being whipped. And yet official opposition was actually part of NRA. Like Obote said, they had one leg in parliament and one leg in the bush. And the government knew. Dr. Semugeri was never at any one time whipped or did in fact no official opposition leader, where these days not only parliamentarians but even councillors, get treated the way they are. So it's extraordinary. Yes, there was war in Luweero, and war in Luweero, was government side versus NRA, and the streets of Kampala, there were NRA bandits and NRA thugs. Now we know many of them, like Utafire said, they dress up in UPC uniforms. I know cases where the NRA guys would come into the streets of Kampala, throw grenades, and people would run around. So it was a very difficult time at the time. But it is not, and that's why I said at the beginning, and I think Comrade Rich was just preparing to come on set, that I couldn't believe that we would experience the kind of thing that we experienced in the year 2021, 2020, 2021, because it was absolutely not necessary. In the Obote time, remember, Amin had just gone, immediately Amin gone, Obote comes 6 weeks after election, you're just trying to reconstitute a new government post, Idi Amin, and the bandits were busy throwing stones in Luweero and siding with certain sections within Buganda. They're already making Kampala ungovernable.
Thank you so much, Honorable. Major Awich, while making statements about the sanctions, particularly on members of parliament, the president gave a scenario in Europe and USA where he says these people marry close relatives, sisters, brothers, according to the president. And he says this is unacceptable in our society. And he goes on to say, should we then also impose sanctions on these people? Should we also deny them visas to come to our country because they marry their close relatives? Is the NRM government looking at sanctioning people in the other way around?
So writing down like Jesus.
NRA has to format it properly.
Looking down on sanctioning.
Those who are doing incest.
Okay, I will answer that, but I will answer. And I will answer partly because you asked the congressman, what would they do if they were sanctioned? He never answered. I thought you put the ball in front of him to kick. For example, I thought I would say, if we were sanctioned, we would address the human rights, we would do this, but he never answered it. Mm-hmm. Anyway, that is his question that he avoided. Let me answer hypothetical, but so he refused to answer your question. Me, I will answer. Whether or not we would sanction the Europeans. You can't. But you see, in international law, there's supposed, between states and states, there's always a way you do back. Give a simple example. If Kenya and Uganda are brothers, but if Kenya chased the ambassador of Uganda from Nairobi, most likely Uganda would do the same. If Kenya chased the third secretary of Uganda to Nairobi embassy, Uganda would do the same thing. So it happens in international relations. For example, Turkey. Recently, France said that they were banning the Turkish schools which were teaching madrasas in France. France gave its reasons. So the Turkish president said, it's okay, if you don't want our schools in your country, we also have so many French schools here. Please close it. The French lifted the other ban. Said, hey, we are sorry. No, continue with your school. Let us also continue. So it happens a lot into bilateral of states, state to state. But I don't think NRM, sober as it is, will do that retaliatory system, which is most practiced in states. We can.
Can you?
But what we can do is that we know we are, first of all, we want human rights. None of us said we don't want human rights. The challenge that we have had is enforcement through state as systems. For example, a Gisu in Lamour district, a Gisu in Lamour districts, either out of zeal or ignorance or a state of mind, decides to torture the way he did. And that goes on record. Do you think it was a government policy? Was it the government who told him? Was it Museveni who told him? So the problem now is enforcement. And part of enforcement is awareness raising. A Gisu like that, we could have in part of the training human rights component so that they know it. So we are not going to start to do what is practice international relations. That you chase my ambassador, I chase yours. You do this, I do it. You close my schools like Turkey, France was doing to Turkey. Turkey said we also close yours. We are not going to do that. I hope I've answered your question. Or I've kept quiet like my Congress brother. So now, having answered you, I have to comment on other things that my friends raised. Now, on the question of Uganda position on violating international, what my sister calls international statutes, it is actually safer to call it instruments, because statutes are laws passed in parliament. The legislation in parliament are the statutes. The other ones are either conventions or covenants, like covenant on economic and political, covenant on social and political rights, then convention on the rights of children, convention against discrimination of women, whatever it is. So the position in the world is that, first of all, states ratify and agree to obey. Uganda did. They said even domesticate it. We have domesticated it. It now becomes part of our law. We don't even have to obey as it is. Because if you obey as it is, enforceability becomes difficult. To enforce it, you must put it in the local law where punishment is this. Conventions have no punishment. So we have domesticated it. Two, there's a system called compliance system, and that is a system I've been there for 8 years, where General Assembly in New York elect 9 persons to sit in Geneva and look state by state. I've been on that body for 8 years and I've met all the countries in the world. Now, Uganda's position is that Uganda has been making reports for this compliance. And what comes out, the product is called concluding observations. And the concluding observations on Uganda has not been the worst, because I have known all concluding observations around the world. So that is how the world check our compliance on international instruments. Article by article. If it is right to food, what have you done to right to food? And they give a checklist to see whether people have right to food, right to education, they do it. So to my sister is that the compliance on international conventions, Uganda has done so well and will continue to do so well by domesticating the law and even constantly reporting to Geneva, which I have met Uganda government twice when I was there. So that is our compliance. Now, about the torture that happens, like this General Luero, the deputy CDF, made sure they appear in court martial. Seriously. And they will be penalized, punished severely. These people who were beating that we are talking about. What is done to people who killed the 50? Now, the 50 people, madam, is that the case of the killing which took place in Wandegea, the person was sentenced to 35 years. The case which was happening...
What's the name of that person who was sentenced?
It is there. You can get it for you. It is there on the net. It's state agents, police or soldiers. The one who did in a Rubaga got life in prison, and they're in Kitala. Now, the third position is that the government is saying people died. If you have, it is an open-ended, if you have information that Sergeant so-and-so killed Walogembe, in that 50, you bring it.
The BBC documentary does.
If you think it is binding, or if it gives enough evidence, let somebody pick it from it. The families of these have complainants. So it is just enough for a family member to pick those evidence and lodge a complaint, and prosecution will go on. So that is about the 50 killing.
No, the government doesn't display.
That is what I'm saying, 35 years and then the life in prison.
My question was, if I can rephrase it, about the person who was commanding that force which went out to kill. You see, today
I've already said that there is no defense of the superior command, because if a couple killed in a Wandegea police, we can't now generally say it was a commander.
No.
So
For instance, so, the prison boss is being sanctioned for the crimes committed by his officers in prison. So today, I would like to see a commander of police being sanctioned or punished by the Uganda government because the commanders under his charge were negligent enough to let their officers murder people on Kampala streets.
I'm not there to argue on those who put sanctions on Biabasaija. But what I know with Biabasaija is that in the eyes of the people, if I was to argue to be the devil advocate, on the eyes of those who sanctioned, they believe that the torture was institutionalized.
Yes.
In the case of the soldiers who killed in Wandegea and killed in Rubaga, the belief is not that it was institutionalized.
What about kidnappers?
Oh my dear, can I now finish? It just can't go on like this.
Sorry.
So, in the case of Biabasaija, if I'm to argue on the devil's advocate, they think this torture is institutionalized. And in the case of soldiers who are scattered all over Kampala, they think it is erratic behavior of some soldiers, and that's why they are directly answerable. And that's why they can't invoke the defense of Attorney General.
Yeah, let me just give some information. On that November saga, the Commander-in-Chief, the President of the Republic of Uganda, said openly that it was carried out by commandos who were coming from Somalia, commanded by General Muhanga. So I think that one puts it on record that it was a choreographed thing, agreed by the high command, that these people, they realized they were going to cause problems in Kampala, these young men. And he said they were just disciplined a little.
Just a little.
You can imagine.
No, I think that is a distortion. What the president meant was that it is the group, the forces that brought down riot. He didn't say they killed people. Okay. Now, who is going to police the police?
Yeah.
Who is going to police the police is, as a government, it's not an ad hoc basis. It's institutional framework. You have the police and the law governing it, and the law is what is policing them. Then under the police laws, you have institutions like the police disciplinary committee. Recently, I had a presentation in European Parliament, and the presentation was about what do the state machineries do to their officers. I got a list of decisions passed from police disciplinary committee, including the one which punished those who mishandled people who went basically past Kalerwe market. I got a whole list, and similarly, I got a whole list from court martial from the army. So the way the disciplinary institution in police is also like in court martial. They have their strict code and their strict institution. So that answers who will police the police. The other thing is, my congressman says that...
Briefly, Major.
You see now, three people talked in 2 rounds, and I have to answer one. That is unfair.
You came late.
You went to a second round without me. Now, just comment about sanctions against South Africa. It is unfair, of course, the way these people use their sanctions. South African sanctions was when the Mandela cried that sanction the whites. Reagan and Margaret Thatcher were saying, we want constructive engagement. Constructive engagement. That if you sanction South Africa, the ordinary blacks will suffer. But here they go against democratic governments. I have so much information to share, I will refrain from it. Of course, you said they should join you in truth and reconciliation. I can't.
You better.
Huh?
You better. It's in your interest, actually, Comrade Awich.
I can't. And
Well,
then...
reason, if you don't mind, actually, what's the argument, actually?
You know, truth and reconciliation is actually an agreed confession between two parties. I have wronged you, you have wronged me. Now, this takes me to later Biriga. When the Archbishop said NRM should apologize, Biriga said apologize on what? It should be the Bishop in Tagali to apologize. And some of the, thanks to the software technology, when Biriga died, somebody pulled it out and said, Biriga said, what should we apologize for? It is him who should apologize. So truth and reconciliation by conception means two parties agree to confess their sins, and we have no such a sin. That's why I'm saying we can't. Now, just for clarity, we always think that our audience should learn. Bashir's sanction was not a sanction by America. Bashir's sanction was actually system through where it was. Where a treaty body, like Right of the Child, gets a report that there was violation of right of the children in Darfur, and government of Sudan doesn't respond. They don't even say their story. And the rule is that this committee, they are finding, if government cannot explain satisfactory explanation, you forward to Security Council. So Bashir was indicted by Security Council. And the miscalculation he made is that he had allies, which I can't say on air, who had veto power to veto that resolution in Security Council. What his friends did in Security Council, they just walked out instead of vetoing. And Bashir was. So it was a Security Council indictment. In the case of Kony, for example, Kony indictment was a complaint launched by Uganda government to say is committing international crime, but they're outside our jurisdiction. We can't arrest them. So we give it to you. So you see the difference. Kony was a move by government of Uganda. Bashir was a move by UN. And his reliance on his friends proved fertile because they didn't veto. If one of the 5 veto powers had said no, the motion would have died. They walked out.
And of course, the hypocrisy was that NRA dared take Kony to the International Criminal Court when Museveni and his NRA, for the atrocities committed in Acholi and northern Uganda generally, it was almost in common sense that both parties needed to have ended up in.
But for record, I have so many replies which I've left. Given time in future, I will reply. So don't think what I have not replied to.
You are taking my time.
Thank you so much.
I thought we have done.
Thank you so much, but I want to briefly in a minute pick your view. One, you've been asking for the commander, and Professor here gave information that it was General Kayanja Muhanga who commanded. But the president is also on record to have said that they will not allow anyone who disorganizes the country, and in any case someone turns out to disorganize, they will go on and crush that person. Perhaps that was the mode of crushing, killing.
Is the president above the law?
I'm asking, do you, in your view, should the president be sanctioned?
Of course.
Definitely. If he is violating the rights, if it is the one who commanded that massacre, he should equally be sanctioned. But you took away all my time, but I have something to say about the US sanctions. Yes. So these sanctions, it seems as if the US came out of the blue and staged the sanctions. But these sanctions, there are so many Ugandans who have been advocating for them year after year. True. And these countries have been silent. So this small step by US so far is a small achievement for those groups, and would like to applaud them. Because people are there world over. protesting the gross human rights and the violations in Uganda. I also have a point which I want to raise very quickly. Most of the issues which were raised were the violations that came out from the last elections. So the government committed these crimes, the arbitrary issues, the gross violation of human rights during the election system. We are preparing for 2026 elections. If there are no reforms, what type of elections are we looking forward to as Ugandans?
Thank you so much. And key to note there is you call it a small step by the US.
Yeah, small, because we need more. They can do more. They have capacity to do more.
In the name of World Bank refusing to give loans to Uganda, suspension from AGOA, sanctioning of individuals and the state. Really, it's a small step then. What you look out for. But ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on this edition of the Citizens Chat Show. And to you, our viewers, thank you so much for keeping with us on the Citizens Chat Show. Special thanks to the Center for Constitutional Governance for making this possible, and special thanks to the technical team, Pearl and producer Rashid. Thank you so much. We want to say Merry Christmas, and may you have freedom always.